about references and the process to number one, call and check references, and then the process to disseminate that information. And I think when we kind of laid that out, we mentioned kind of two pathways here, and I'll repeat those two and then offer a third perhaps. One is, we do a divide and conquer, and we do that amongst the management subcommittee. I think that Carolyn, you had mentioned that there were 5 or 6 different categories of references. So that's one option. A second option is that we open that to anyone on the school committee, and they'll need to then come up with a process for, anticipating that there'll be more than 6 people that are interested, coming up with a process for selecting that in a very, very quick way. And the third that I'll offer is that we have one person go through the reference checks, and that in essence we have someone that is not necessarily a school committee member, but a trusted individual to this process, that could do such a task in a trusted capacity and in a professional way. So I lay out those pathways as a starting point for our discussion, and we'll be certainly happy to entertain some discussion. Christina?
I like the third option that you presented. I think that that sounds the best to me, because it's one person gathering all that data, and some of what they hear might prompt other questions. So it's like they have the whole picture in front of them. It also keeps that information confidential in a way. And I think in the last meeting, Carolyn had said that we wouldn't be discussing the references in public, but it would just be getting like an affirmation that references were done and that the reference was positive overall or something like that. So I think that that cuts down on having that kind of information get out that in a way that we wouldn't want it to. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but just that it keeps it more secure in one person's hand.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody just popped up and then it went away. I didn't see who it was.
It was me. I accidentally hit that button instead of the stop microphone.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to let you know that I'm also on.
Hi, Asima.
This is Asima. Yeah, hi.
Okay. Any other thoughts, discussion? Ken?
I agree with Christina. I think that's the best option.
Okay. Carl's giving a thumbs up. Sherry's giving a head nod. I can't see everybody here, but that's kind of what I'm seeing. The trusted person that I would have in mind is Sue Sullivan, who's staff to this process, and of course, Susan has been very key in helping us progress thus far. Former human resource director in the district, former school committee chair, and I think would be uniquely well suited to carry that out on our behalf. So, not seeing it much other discussion or objection. If not, we could move on to something else. So the other thing I wanted to come back to, we talked about questions, and I think we talked about giving everyone the opportunity to at least ask a question, with the understanding that in so doing, there's really not going to be an opportunity for follow-up. And Carolyn had shared that if you do some quick math, it equates to roughly 4 minutes a question. Of course, not all answers are going to be created equal. One of the things we talked about was, how the screening committee went about pre-processing questions in advance versus not. And, in the course of the last week, I did get a couple of questions around, how is it that what is it that we can do to manage this process in a way that we're not not everyone is either asking very, very similar questions, or that we are so heavily weighted on one particular theme that we're not focused on the others. And so, another way, if we think that this is advisable, another thing that we could do is ask for people to bring forward their questions in advance. Say we send them to Sue to collect them by Sunday night. What we would ask people to do is to identify the theme to which their question corresponds, right? So if I'm asking a question about the budget, it would correspond to strong fiscal leadership. If I'm asking a question about communication, so on and so forth. We have four major themes in the candidate profile. Not every question might fit as tidy as that. But if we ask folks to, submit their questions in advance with the themes, we can ask Susan to categorize those questions by theme and distribute them to the entire school committee so that we all have an idea of what the menu of questions are. And one can very quickly see that if there's questions that look very similar, then maybe I move to, a second question or a different question that I have for that night, or maybe I don't feel compelled that I need to ask one, perhaps. But what it also allows us to do is organize questions by theme so that, you can envision that we go into an interview and try to have a discussion around budget. And so we start to ask many of the budget related questions and then move into inclusion and move into other areas. So that little bit of preparation, I would submit, would allow us to at least be able to have everyone have the same play sheet and be able to organize ourselves a little bit that way. Again, the alternative is people just show up, they raise their hand, I call on them, they ask a question, and we move on. But let me put that out there for discussion and feedback.
Can I raise my hand, Mike, if no one else?
Asma, you're up.
So I was on the search committee when we did it a few years ago, right? And what I really liked about that process, kind of what you hinted at, as, categories with questions, and the whole school committee has access to those questions. And I think, I don't know if you mentioned this in what you were saying, but maybe rating those questions or sometimes combining those questions so that we all feel that a lot of the major questions are going to be asked by that one person. So I just wanted to summarize. I do agree with what yourself and Christina had said about one person taking a category and doing the questions for all the candidates so that we get a comprehensive view from one person's perspective. But at the same time, the questions, I do agree that if we can give it to the school committee and then rate those questions about importance and how to word them would also be great.
Yeah, so just a quick comment on what you described. So the reference checks, I think, it sounds like there's some consensus to move forward and have Susan do this on our behalf. The interview questions themselves, we had some discussion last week around, is there some value in not only collecting the questions in advance, but, running them through, Carolyn, for example, to help with maybe just some phrasing, maybe combining, maybe shortening, what have you. And, it seemed like, or my read was that there was not a lot of appetite for doing that part of combining or what I called polishing, maybe not a great term. But that's what we're here to discuss. So whatever the general census is, look for other feedback. Ken?
I guess maybe a happy medium I'll throw out there is that perhaps everyone submits 2 questions, right? And Carolyn collects them and organizes them, and you call off the question and say, okay, well, Ken, you had a question about this, and Christina, you had a question about that, and then we read them, so it's our own voice. We're having a conversation. We might have a follow-up if we have time within the time limit. But it does give a chance, for it to be in our own words. So I feel people might be a little bit If they feel like, okay, well, you combine my question with that question, it doesn't really get what I wanted to ask in this new format. That might avoid that. And if I was to submit you two, and you're like, well, Christina had an awesome question about budget, and yours was okay, but it was kind of in Christina's question. We're going to pick your second question for you, like something like that. I think could maybe be a happy medium, especially if we get turned around to us before the first thing. And also, just as an aside, I love Lance. He was great, but I kind of want to know sort of like when I'm coming, so that I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, Mike's going to call me now. Oh, no, he's not. Mike's going to, oh, no, he's not. Just so I can kind of like be mentally in the game about when my question is coming.
Could I interject something?
You mean to say you're not always mentally in the game?
I'm always mentally in the game, Mike, but just at different levels of in the game.
I understand. No, and by the way, if it wasn't clear, I of course everyone would be asking their question. But I do think it's a good idea to have a couple of questions out there, because it may be that many people come up with the same question, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to ask the same question multiple times.
Could I interject if you don't mind? I'm sorry, because I can't see you. Oh, yep. Yes. Tonight, what I'd like to do with the school committee is have each member talk about what they want to ask a question around. Like their theme can be from the profile, but then there's also a suggested list of themes that fit under those categories in their packet: collective bargaining, conflict and dispute. And I think if people hear the categories that each wants to ask for whomever is attending, then maybe somebody will say, since so-and-so took that category, I think I'll switch mine over to here. Or they may say, since so-and-so took that category, I'm good with not writing one. But I think people should know what, as best as possible, as best you can, what each person intends to write a question around, so that right at tonight's meeting, we can say we seem to be really heavy into the fiscal, and we seem to be really light in the whatever, and people can say, I think I can switch over to that. And then I would say probably just send your questions to Susan and have her put them in themes. I wouldn't spend too much time trying to, again, polish them up, because these are elected school committee members and they want to ask what they want to ask. And I'm going to speak to the school committee tonight about speechifying, taking up the time to give a speech rather than asking a question, and those kind of things. So hopefully I have great faith that it's going to just go beautifully. But I think all you need to do is collect them by theme and have Susan do what Laura did for the screening committee, which is put them under by theme and leave a space for people we'll talk about that, to write some responses. That's my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. Ken?
I appreciate faith. It's great. My concern with this evening, if we put people in the spot, I think we can try and work that out, but I can hear certain members saying, like, I'm getting this training now, I'm reading this document now, maybe I got it ahead of time, but I was at work, and then feeling a little bit like I can't actually commit at this moment. So I think we could make good progress towards that, but it might have to be resolved a little bit when people can process what they've learned. Because like, if I'm going to be trained and then immediately like ask a question based on that training, I might need some. We've already admitted I'm not always in the game, right? I might need a minute to like process what I've just been taught to kind of come up with something. So I think just people might need to have that space tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my sense, Ken, similar, is that we're not trying to, and I think part of it, Carolyn too, is maybe the way that it's framed, right? I mean, we're not trying to finalize questions and themes tonight. I think that what your intention is to get a general sense of, how many people are weighing in what theme, so that, if we know that we are getting 20 questions on budget and very few for others, that we can try to address that there. Might be harder to kind of go around one by one, see how we have to do that. But I do agree that people will want to have some time to reflect and then send in their question and their theme to us. Christina?
I liked Ken's idea earlier about it's a lot of questions probably, but giving people the option of doing 2 questions, writing 2 questions, maybe it's 1 to 2 questions, and then we'd have that pool of questions. And then I'm wondering if it's possible just to bring some organization to it, to have more organization, is to, like, right before the first interview, to maybe have 10 minutes where we have all looked, we would have had the questions ahead of time that were pulled together, but then to decide as a committee which ones from each category we might ask. So maybe it's like if there are 10 that are on budget, that it's these 5 that are going to be, or that's a lot. These 4 questions are going to be asked. From this section, we're going to ask these, and then it would give, each person would know what question of theirs is being asked. I don't know if that's through a meeting beforehand, if we're able to do that, if it's like, I don't know, but I'm envisioning a chaotic situation if we don't know ahead of time what questions we might be asking. I don't know if that's just in my head that's coming out that way, but I don't know.
I agree with you. This is Carolyn. I agree with you. When we work with the screening committee, we have the meetings start at, say, 7 o'clock and the interviews start at 7:30, just to give the committee a chance to get their ducks in a row, at least for the first person they're interviewing, so they can just make sure that they all know and they see the questions and they're good. I don't know whether you can do that or you can, when you're putting out the schedule for the interviews, if you push them back, but the committee meets at, say, 7:30 and the candidate is interviewed at 7:45.
Yeah, what Laura did was a little bit different than that, right? So I guess I'll say 2 things. I mean, I think, Christina, I was with you up until the deliberate on the questions part, because I think that gets tricky. So what Laura did, and this is not necessarily what I would suggest in this case, but what Laura did was everyone had the master sheet of questions that were going to be used, and depending on the answer, she kind of called on people as appropriate. Just so everyone was on alert for when their question was going to be asked. I think the problem with us trying to deliberate questions 5 or 10 minutes before is that we're going to spend more than 5 or 10 minutes deliberating on questions, and we probably overtake the meeting deliberating on questions, quite frankly. And so, an alternative to that is, we can try to put out a script in advance of how we think those questions are going to go. And that there's no reason why that script couldn't be the same script for all 4 candidates. Sherry, and then Carl.
Would it be possible for us, and maybe this is putting too much into it, but to maybe have everyone submit their 2 questions into some Google Doc, and then essentially have somebody put them into the categories, and then have the committee vote and pick 4 questions from each category, and whichever questions are the most requested are the ones that are asked?
You have to be aware of the open meeting law. You have to so you would have to check to see if you can conduct business like that offline. I'll leave that to Michael. Usually the work has to be, the discussion can go just one way, to Susan, here's my question, but no, maybe because she's not on the school committee, you could discuss with her, but I don't think there can be discussion between and among school committee members.
It wouldn't be so much, I'm sorry, it wouldn't be so much discussion as just submitting data to then be discussed.
So collecting questions, through Susan is not an issue. I think that if we're going to deliberate and vote on questions, that needs to be done in open session, and then we got to figure out a process for doing that. And so, when do we do that? How do we do that? How much time do we want to spend doing that? And quite frankly, is it worth it? I'm not sure. Carl and then Linda.
So I was going to add, I mean, kind of along the lines of what Sherry had mentioned that, like, I mean, like if we can kind of get a sense for like the categories that people are looking to ask their questions in, then like having administration set up a Google form that has a drop down menu for the category. So like you open the drop down and you say come down to budget, and then you'd write your budget question for that. So it would automatically kind of I would automatically tag like your question for the category that it's in. So the output from that would be like, these are all the budget categories. These are all the budget questions. These are the education questions. These are the legal questions. And I think that, I mean, probably the best case then would be kind of going into that first meeting to be able to say, I guess for you, Mike, to look at this and say, all right, I've got 20 budget questions. These are like, this is what we're looking to do. Because I mean, I think if we, as you kind of mentioned, I think if we try to get into deliberation about each and every question, we could be deliberating probably for a day in of itself.
Right.
So it may be just, as a chair, you may just have to say, I'm picking these budget questions to go with, or these 4 budget questions here, these other budget I don't know. I think it may have to go that route though.
Yeah. Linda?
Can it be that we do go around and we ask them to pick a theme? We see if one is overly picked tonight. I mean, I don't think they need to come up with a question, but they should be able to come up with a theme. And because I'm going to show them the 4 themes and talk about that. But it could be that everybody writes 2 questions and then they are divided underneath the themes. You know, if 5 people submit a budget question, fine. If 5 submit, if it's evenly divided, but if it's not, then they go with the second question. I don't think we're going to have a lot of time as a committee to spend debating your questions. And you have to be careful because that has to take place in open session.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, it should go without saying, I think, that, or maybe it should be said that, you know, the goal here is for everyone to ask a question, right? We're giving everybody an opportunity to ask a question. All we're trying to do is put a little bit of organization around it.
Right.
Linda and then Christina.
So that is my question: is how many questions are we expecting? Because I mean, 21 questions. That sounds better as a game than a strategy.
Well, I think that, we as we discussed this before, right? We said that to be fair, we should give everyone an opportunity to at least ask a question, but that probably means that you don't have much time or there's no opportunity for follow-up.
I guess will there be an opportunity for members who feel like their questions have been asked to just bow out and say it's taken care of?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody is, like I said to at the front of this, right? I mean, you know, if what we're trying to do is allow people to see, all right, look, if the question's been asked, if I have a second question, we can pivot to that question. If I don't have a second question or there's nothing that's coming, I feel like my question's been addressed. There's nothing that says that you have to ask a question. Christina and then Carl.
So I'm just trying to understand what it will look like on that night, and I think maybe I have it now. So you'll have the list. We'll all have the list of questions, and if I'm hearing you, you might call on. So you're going to be the one orchestrating who's going to go when, based on whatever the flow of questions might be. So maybe you had said before you might call on Ken. So you call on Ken. Ken, you might say, ask your budget question, but he has a question also about diversity. But are you asking Ken, are you kind of directing Ken? Like, would you ask your budget question, or are you saying, Ken, do you want to ask a question?
I'll go one step further. I mean, what you could do, right, is not do it on the fly. You come up with it in advance. we're going to start with budget questions, and here's
Okay.
the order of budget questions. Then we're going to
Yeah.
move to inclusion questions. Here's the order of inclusion questions. Then we're going to move to
Okay.
communication, so that everyone has that in front of them.
Yes. Yeah.
Before we even start.
And then people, like you're saying, so if we do that, we start with budget or whatever it might be. 4 people may have submitted budget questions. Ken's first, so he asks his budget question, he reads it. Then the second question, the person had already answered part of that question in in response to Ken. So if it's me, I'm the second person, I say, I'm going to pass. So then it goes to the third person. They can ask or they can say, I'm passing, because sometimes the candidates give 5-minute long answers, which have encompassed all of that stuff. Okay,
Absolutely.
so that makes sense. I just wanted to have some organization. I like your suggestion of categories to go with the themes. Here they all are, and let's just let's see what happens as we ask them. All right,
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you. That makes it clear.
Sure.
Can I respond to I'm sorry, I don't know the woman who was just speaking. I like that. If every school committee member has a second question in their pocket, and if they're listening and they say, oh, that really was covered, and you say, I'm going to pass because I'm going to be asking my question under a different theme, and you bring out your second question. Not every school committee member needs to know every other school committee member's question in advance, but instead of passing, you might say, I pass, or you might say, I'm going to wait and ask under a different theme. Thank you. Does that sound doable?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very similar to what Christine, you described, right?
Right.
Carl?
So, I mean, and then just the other thing to think about, and it would be a good question for the full committee, is to see if everyone wants to be able to ask a question to every candidate, knowing that you're looking at a 4-minute window for that. Or if people would be content saying, as long as I get to ask a question to 2 of the 4, knowing that allows for more time for discussion, maybe I get a chance to ask a follow-up question if an opportunity presents itself. I think that, I mean, it would be, I don't know where the full committee would go on that, but cutting the number of questions in half certainly can change the dynamic of the interview and an opportunity for dialogue.
So I guess I'd offer 2 things. One is that, part of what the advice that we've been hearing from NESDEC, right, is that we really ought to try to have as much of the same questions asked of each candidate as we can. And so, even if it's not precise, right, in Christina's example, we have the same script, but somebody really answered that question. I mean, I think that passes. So, asking a question of 2, but not of all 4, might be perceived a little bit differently than that. The other thing that I'd offer is that, look, if we're able to get through, everyone has an opportunity to ask a question, and not everyone feels like they need to ask their question because maybe it's already been asked, and there's time at the end, then there may be time for follow-ups or revisiting something, and so we can offer it that way. But I think otherwise, again, I think we want to have the same place sheet. Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we want to have the same place sheet going into the meeting with every candidate.
I say so because the public will be watching, and many people in the public are under the misguided belief that you have to ask them in the same way, in the same order, with the same words, and you don't need to poke that bear. You just make sure that you ask similar questions of every candidate. Right. I wouldn't ask something of 2 and not of the other 2, because that could be perceived as giving somebody an advantage over another.
Thank you, Ken.
Just a couple of quick hits. One, I'd be, if for your hands, Mike, I would really not have any follow-ups until the end, because I think you'll wind up having smaller numbers of people dominate the conversation, and I think we want everyone to have airtime. Secondly, in terms of when I can say like my theme would be, leadership and communication, for instance. I might want to have some slightly subtle different variations of that same question to the people based on where they're coming from, because people are coming with different backgrounds. So
Right.
So I probably would submit 4 different versions of my same question, just so that it's aimed to a particular person. Not
My sense, I don't think
yeah.
you need to, right? I mean, I don't think that we're going to be looking
Yeah.
to see whether you're reading your question precisely,
Okay, well, that's fine.
Right.
right?
Yeah, and
Right.
this may not be the time for this, but we're jamming all this stuff into this 90 minutes. I would encourage us, maybe we'll talk about this soon, to give the candidate an opening and a closing opportunity, just to kind of like let us hear their, like, even if this is your question, you might want to steal your question, but could you start with giving us your vision for the district, or something like that, just so they can kind of just have a you could even tell them ahead of time, we're going to ask you your vision for your district, so they can come in and kind of start talking a little bit. So it's not just like rapid fire, boom, 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 boom. And at the
Yeah.
end, it'd be nice if they had a time to be like, just to go back, like I heard a bunch of questions about this. And as I'm thinking through, let me just conclude by saying, just to give them some space.
Yeah. No, I think what we're going to try to do, right, is the first question. I'm not going to call it my question, but the first question will be an opportunity to, and we'll process this a little bit with them ahead of time, but an opportunity to address the committee in less than 2 minutes, however they want to address the committee. And we'll say up front that, look, this is the format. These are the questions that we're trying to get to, and we want to allow or allot some time at the end for you to share with us anything that you think we didn't hear tonight, that we ought to, or any other remarks that you think are pertinent as we close out the interview. So I think that will be the plan for opening and closing. Any other thoughts, questions? So it sounds like collect the questions, have them sent to Susan, put them in cross by categories, and we'll have a commonplace sheet going into the interviews. All right. Last item that I had for us for our discussion is just, I think we touched on it a little bit in the last meeting, was feedback forms. Carolyn, your past practice has been in many of these searches is to allow people, not only people who have come into contact with the candidate, but really anybody, to have a mechanism to be able to provide their feedback or input to the school committee regarding a candidate. And that
Right.
most recently NESDEC has been doing that through online links.
Right. The purpose is to allow people to watch the school committee interview with the candidates and watch all 4. And I'll talk more about this at the school committee meeting, to have people have a chance to watch the candidates and then go to a link on the school committee site. And if they want to give feedback about a particular candidate, they click on the link of that candidate's name, and they're asked questions. And that will be collected electronically and provided to the school committee. People who meet the candidate in the meet and greet, the day in the district when they're going around, parents who have a chance to meet the candidates, and staff, and anybody really who has an opportunity to meet the candidate can go and provide feedback. What we want is, and if somebody knows of the candidate, you really cannot stop people from providing feedback who have neither met the candidate or listened to the interview, but you hope that it's people who have actually engaged with the candidate who are providing feedback.
Right.
Yes.
So thank you for that. So we talked a little bit last time about having some combination of rating aspect to this, but I think we also want to know you know, there's not much value in submitting this anonymously. And so we'd want to know if somebody's, you know, putting forward feedback, that they're putting their name behind it, and they're letting us know, you know, the context in which they're doing it, and frankly, whether or not they met the candidate. I think it's worthwhile for us to know that. We also kind of put some parameters. You have to put some parameters around when we shut down this feedback, right? And so, you know, we probably, if we're going to deliberate on the 17th, need to shut it down sometime, you know, no later than the end of the day or end of the business day on the 16th, so that the school committee members will have access to be able to see the feedback. But let me open that up for discussion. Sherry?
So regarding who's meeting the candidates, I was under the impression for the day at the district that each candidate was going to go to the same schools, so that we were getting feedback from, I saw like one of them's going to NAQUAG, so that Dixie would be giving her feedback on all 4 candidates and not on one candidate. I just want to make sure that we're going to compare apples to apples when we're looking at their feedback, and seeing it from this same perspective seemed to me like it would be more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'd offer there, 2 things, right? So one is that, you know, people can provide feedback, but they're not voting. So I think it's going to be, you know, unusual that somebody is going to, you know, be in a place ordinarily, you know, where they're going to try to go out and meet all 4 candidates and then tell us you know, who they pick. Rather, based on their interactions or based on what they see in the interview or whatever their basis for commenting is, they're going to tell us what they think about a candidate when they have information about that candidate. And so, you know, again, it's not a vote. It's just a mechanism to provide feedback. The other thing that I'd say is that, you know, we discussed this about a week ago. I think that there was some interest in trying to rotate around the schools that that would be included in this process. And I can tell you that, you know, when Susan reached out to the principals across the district, all were very excited to, you know, have an opportunity to you know, be part of this and at least show off their school in some way. So it was kind of a, you know, a way to get more people in buildings involved.
And I will say there, it is common because parents pre-K to 12, no matter where their student is enrolled, can come to the parent one for each of the 4. And there's 2 parent times built in for each of the candidates, and all parents in the district are welcome. Same way for the staff. Staff can meet all 4. All the staff in the district can meet all 4 candidates during that staff time. So and they'll all be going to the middle school. They'll all be going to the high school. So they'll have common experiences. But if somebody wants to meet all 4 candidates, there's opportunities for them to do that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Carolyn. I mean, for example, we have a meet and greet in the morning that includes principals, and you know, one of the things that we cleared was that number 1, that time works, and number 2, it would not be terribly difficult for principals to leave their schools and come and meet across those 4 days at the same time. So in your example of you know, Dixie, for example, Sherry, you know, if she decides, just picking on her as the example that you chose, decides that she wants to come to all 4 meet and greets in the morning or during the staff time for that matter, you know, she has the option to do that.
Right. And I would encourage people to do that so that they can make, you know, a comparison. But, you know, people can be as involved as they would like to be. And there's plenty of opportunities when you look at that for people to meet the candidate and talk with the candidate. And you have staff who are also parents, so you know, theoretically they could go to both. Go ahead. I'm sorry. On the phone, I can't tell I'm butting in here.
No, you're good. You're good, Ken.
I had a question about something slightly different, so I can wait in the parking lot if the other people have questions about this topic.
No.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on this topic? All right, Ken, we'll go to you and then we'll wrap it up.
So I had a question, and I know there's probably nothing we can do about this, about participation in the interviews and the voting. So, and was curious to get Carolyn's input into this. So, you know, we've been doing this hybrid thing, which I have to say I really hate. I kind of wish that we would just be in person for this, so we could all have the same modality that we could be meeting the candidates with. We're not required to have hybrid meetings, right? It's an option. And I can imagine some people, for legitimate reasons, might not be able to come to meeting B of the 4, so they won't have had the same experience with the candidate. I guess they can watch it on film later. But if they're not there to ask their question, we have to be prepared to think about, okay, well, if this was Ken's question and Ken had a problem, he could make it tonight, someone's got to be ready to ask my question. But I guess my other question is just the whole, like, how are we going to work the hybrid thing if we're doing the hybrid thing? Because I think it could be a mess.
I'll leave that to you, Michael, because I think it could be a mess too, but I'm not sure how you would do it.
Sherry?
Yeah, I have to agree. And I don't know how it would work just from a microphone standpoint. Just if we're not broadcasting it and only recording it, do the microphones work with just like when we're in executive session?
Yeah, I don't know.
So do we know for sure that we need the hybrid? I mean, is anybody asking? Maybe nobody's asking. Maybe everybody. I mean, I agree. I think it should all be in person. I think that there's like a different playing field aspect when it's hybrid for something like this versus a regular meeting where, like, you don't, for example, have childcare.
Yeah, so I mean, we can not offer this. So when we say hybrid, right? Well, basically what we're doing is we're having an in-person meeting. We're just providing a different electronic medium to participate. And that electronic medium to participate, we need to provide something for remote members, right? Ken, correct me if I'm wrong. If somebody says, you know, I can't be there, but I want to participate, I believe we need to provide them with something. And so we could decide that we're not going to use Google Meets as that medium. We'll go back to the phone. But I do believe we have to provide them with something. Ken?
Yeah, I guess we do. I mean, I guess the concern I have is that in our past few meetings, we've been really drifting towards half the people not being there. And I think, you know, at the very least, and I would think this is technologically something I really hope we could pull off. I'd almost go the other way and say, you know, as chair, or I mean, I'm not putting words in your mouth, it'd be best if you could be there, right? It's a different experience, particularly even for the deliberations, right? When you're in face to face. But I'd almost say, like, that screen we have that we show things on, I'd almost want to see, like, cameras on faces if you're not there, rather than the camera, just so, like, you know, it's not some disembodied voice asking a person a question, you know, behind a screen that just has a telephone on it. The best we can. I mean, I know there's limitations, but it's just encouraging people to be there and making it as lifelike as possible, I guess. I don't know.
I have no problem encouraging people to be there. You know how that goes. Sorry, I'm adjusting myself here. You know how that goes, right? So then the question becomes, do we want to put some terms around what remote participation looks like? And I'll leave that for you folks for us to discuss. I mean, I would say, yeah, I would love for us to be able to see people's faces up on screen when they're talking and they're not in the room. But we've been asking for that to happen for, you know, a few months. We couldn't quite be able to affect that. Not sure if we're going to be able to affect it for the next meeting.
I'm going to address that too with the committee, because this is unlike any meetings you've had. This is interviewing people for the position of superintendent. You need to be there. Unless, I'm not going to say this to the whole committee, but I mean, unless your house is burning down, get there. It's really not okay to invite somebody to the district and then not show up.
Yeah, they might listen
So-
to you. They won't listen to me. Somebody else I think tried to chime in and I didn't see it.
I took my hand down.
Okay. So, you know, are we okay then to go into this, strongly encourage everyone to attend? Carolyn has a nice way of, I think, putting it. And, you know, if we know that people are going to attend remotely, we'll have to do the best we can. And I assume we'll do the best we can. Doing the best we can means doing the best we can to try to project people's voices, for people to hear us, for us to see people, and we'll have to work with the administration to do what they can. I can't make a promise on what that's going to look like.
Okay.
I mean, I'm asking that question to the committee here. Does that sound like the plan here?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject. Like, I completely agree that in person is all good, but at the same time, the world is going hybrid. I've been working remote for over 2 decades. I've done interviews remotely with video on, with video off. I've done all types of hybrid situations, and that's the way the world is going. At the same time, if the majority of us can be there in person, that I think is a great idea. But to not accommodate people who can't, I don't agree with that.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion to adjourn has been seconded. We'll go to a roll call vote. Christina?
Smith, yes.
Linda?
Woodland, yes.
Ken?
Well, yes.
Sherry?
Avery, yes.
Carl?
Or yes.
Asima?
Silva, yes.
And Dennis, yes. All right, 5 minutes early. See you guys in 5 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.